So one day I'm picking up my daughter from school. She jumps in the front seat, seems super excited. I knew she was having a party in her class that day. And I asked her how it went. And the first thing she told me is, Mom, I was so good today. I didn't even eat the cupcakes at the party. And my heart just broke. As a mom in eating disorder recovery, I've made it my purpose and my aim to do everything possible to help create positive associations around food in our home and to hear my daughter express guilt or even just attribute moral value to food was just heart-wrenching. And this is happening all around us. Diet culture is so pervasive and it sneaks in our homes in the most unexpected ways. And while we can't control what's happening outside of our homes, like diet culture in schools or things that our kids might hear from their friends, we can examine what is happening in our own home and break the cycle by first understanding where is diet culture sneaking into our parenting. So how does diet culture sneak in? And like I said, it can be really subtle. And these can be things that we're not even aware are happening. And they're things that maybe we grew up with and are just repeating, not intentionally, but because it's something that we learned. And so I want to share with you 3 signs to look for that diet culture might be sneaking into your home and into your parenting. Okay, so first is using healthy as a moral value. And we hear healthy thrown around all the time. The problem is that health is highly contextual and highly individual. It means different things for different people. And our kids, especially younger children, don't yet have the cognitive abilities to understand all the nuances of terms like healthy. And so when we attribute healthy eating to being good, that can be very confusing for our kids, especially children who are developmentally literal thinkers. So they're taking things that we say at face value. So when we say things like, oh, let's be good, or, ooh, I was bad today, because I ate, whatever this food is, they take those things very literally and can internalize those messages to mean, I am good if I eat this, or I am bad if I eat this. And that can really start those associations of food guilt really early on in our kids. And so that's something we want to be really aware of. It's just, what is our language? How are we talking about food? How are we describing it to our kids? Sometimes we say things like this because we're trying to motivate them or get them to eat or try certain foods, but they can really tune in to those hidden agendas that we may have. And again, because they can't yet tease out all the nuances about food, they're looking at it in that dichotomy, that black and white thinking. And we don't want our kids to attribute their moral value to what they eat. So that's one sign to be aware of. The second sign to look for is policing our kids' portion sizes or restricting access to certain foods like sweets. And this is a really hard one because for so many of us because of our own history around food, there are things that our kids might do, or things like their appetite or foods that they naturally gravitate towards that are triggering to us. And we might find it hard to trust our kids to eat what they need. And although we may know and trust that our kids are intuitive eaters and can self-regulate their intake, it can be really hard to not police them or not feel like I have to come in and control this somehow because I'm feeling uncomfortable with how they're eating or how much they're eating or the foods that they're gravitating towards. And again, this can happen really subtly in language or things that we're saying to them, especially when they're eating or asking for food or wanting more food, or maybe looking for food in between our designated eating times. It can be easy to say things like, you've had too much sugar, or you don't need more of that. And again, those might be coming from a really good place and a good intention, but our kids can interpret it as, I can't trust my body. And that can really cause them to question their internal cues, their intuitive eating abilities, and their ability to self-regulate, where they're starting now to look for external cues, external validation to help them and guide their eating decisions. And that can start to disconnect them from their innate intuitive eating cues. And again, a lot of this is language that is being recycled because it may be things that we heard growing up in our homes at meal times. And so this is something that can be really easy to recycle with our kids. A third sign to look for is your own self-talk about your body or even the other adults in your home, how our body is being talked about. And this one can be really hard. As moms, our bodies are changing. We go through incredible body transformations through pregnancy and postpartum. And just as we age, things are changing. And that can be really hard for us. And many of us may be struggling with our own body image challenges, especially if that's something that started for you in your younger years. And so it can be hard to have a positive body narrative about yourself, especially if that's something that you're still working on. And sometimes things slip really innocently. You know, it's like our internal monologue is coming out unintentionally. And sometimes our kids are aware of that or hearing that, or they might be hearing things, you know, from other adults as well. And so we just want to be really careful about the things that we're saying, the narratives that we're repeating. Are we being really critical of our bodies? Are we saying negative things in front of them? Like, oh, I don't want to wear this. I look so fat, I look ugly, whatever that narrative may be. Our kids are listening. Little ears are always listening, and they are absorbing and internalizing those messages. And that is something that we want to pay attention to, because we want to understand how is this impacting how my own child might now feel about their body. The other thing here to consider is not just the narrative around your body, but also how might you talk about other people's bodies. This is something that's very common in diet culture, where we talk about other people's appearance and other people's body sizes and might judge someone based on their body size. And so we also want to be careful about the language that we're using to talk about other people's bodies. And that can be really tricky because, again, these are things that we grew up doing or we grew up hearing, but we want to break those cycles. So really being aware of the inner monologue that's happening in our head, but also what are we saying out loud that our kids might be listening to and absorbing. So if you are thinking, oh my gosh, I've said so many of these things before, or I've done things like this before, I want you to know that there is no shame and there's always hope to shift the cycle in your family. And it's hard work. You know, there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do, especially if we're the first generation in our family lineage to challenge these diet culture messages. And so I want you to know that there is absolutely hope. It's never too late. Remember, awareness is always the first step. So the fact that you're tuning in and listening to this video shows how much you care about your own family and the legacy that you're leaving for your children. And I'll leave you with one tip that you can just consider and think about as you are aiming to remove diet culture from your home and from your parenting. And that is really to start shifting from this need to control, you know, what our kids are eating or how much they're eating, to more of curiosity. And we can do that by asking reflective questions instead of commenting about what we think they should eat or shouldn't eat. So for example, if your child's reaching for that second or third or fourth cookie, and our inclination might be to say, you've had so much sugar, that's way too much, you need to stop. One thing you can try instead is asking a reflective question to your child, like, how does that feel in your body? Or how do you feel when you eat that? And let them be the ones to analyze what that feels like in their bodies versus us putting a narrative on them that can potentially be damaging in terms of how they view themselves or how they view food. But I know these conversations can be overwhelming, which is why I put together for you a food and body script guide that you can grab in the comments below. And I hope that this helps you as you're parenting free from diet culture in your home.